Welcome to the deep dive. It's impossible to ignore anymore. Artificial intelligence isn't just some sci-fi dream. It's really fundamental now, part of how we live, how we work, a basic building block.
Absolutely.
And the rise of generative AI especially has just hit the accelerator, hasn't it?
Totally.
We've gone so fast from, AI ethics being sort of optional guidelines to this point where mandatory regulation is suddenly this huge global race.
It really is a race with everyone running in slightly different directions.
So today, we're diving into that, this really tricky world of this massive regulatory shift. And what's interesting, maybe a bit concerning, is that most current efforts, like the big one, the EU AI Act, they mostly use this thing called a risk-based classification approach.
Standard approach.
Yeah. Sounds sensible on the surface, right?
Yeah.
But this deep dive, well, it's going to uncover some pretty significant limitations. And then we'll explore maybe a surprising new way to think about AI governance.
A fresh perspective.
Exactly. Our insights for this come from a really new academic review article, just published this year, COM25. It takes a critical look at where we are now with AI rules and suggests, well, a totally different framework. So, okay, let's unpack this. It sounds like we're trying to put a fence around something that's constantly growing and changing, right? Is that even possible?
That really is the core question. And you're right, there's this definite race to AI regulation happening globally. Nations are taking incredibly varied paths. Each one kind of reflects their own priorities, their own visions for the future. It's a really urgent and dynamic landscape right now.
So who's leading this race, or at least setting the pace?
Well, leading the charge, especially among Western democracies, you've got the European Union AI Act. It actually came into force August 2024. That makes the EU a definite first mover. It's the world's first really broad standalone law just for AI. And yes, its main tool is that prescriptive, risk-based approach we mentioned.
Okay, so EU is out front. Does that mean everyone else just follows, like we saw with GDPR, that Brussels effect?
Yeah, the Brussels effect. It's definitely something the EU hopes for, that their rules become the global standard, like GDPR did for data privacy. But some experts are suggesting the AI Act might not have quite the same punch globally.
Oh, why is that?
Well, the thinking is that AI isn't really one single policy problem you can wrap a neat bow around. It's more like a set of loosely connected problems, That makes it harder for one set of rules to just naturally become the global default. Different aspects need different solutions, maybe.
Okay, interesting. So if the EU is doing that, what's happening in, say, the U.S.?
The U.S. approach is, well, fragmented is the word, much more so. You've got President Biden's Executive Order 14110 from back in November 2023 at the federal level. But then things get really varied at the state level. Like Colorado passed its own comprehensive AI Act. California tried with Senate Bill 10047 for a broad framework, but that got vetoed, so it's patchy.
And a lot relies on voluntary standards.
Exactly. Organizations like NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, they develop these standards, but they're not mandatory law in the same way the EU Act is. It's a different philosophy.
Okay. EU, US. What about China? They're obviously a huge player in AI development.
China's approach is fascinating. It's described as a kind of synthesis of the EU and US ways. They use sector-specific rules, administrative rules, but also legally binding ones, especially for generative AI. They brought in measures for that in 2023. It's definitely talked down, but sources say it also has a surprising degree of flexibility built in, allowing them to adapt as the tech changes.
So different paths, different philosophies.
Yeah.
But you said there's a common thread.
Yes. Despite all the variations, especially in Western democracies, that risk-based classification idea keeps popping up. It's the dominant model right now.
Right. And this is where, as you said, the deeper critique starts. Risk-based sounds logical. Find the risk, manage the risk. Yeah. But the article we're looking at says, hang on, there's some serious blind spots here.
Exactly. Despite being the go-to approach, it has significant flaws. Our analysis points to 4 really big limitations.
Okay, let's get into them. What's the first one?
The first is the flawed measurement of risk itself. It sounds neutral, right? Risk. But in AI regulation, the research shows it plays a strong political role. It gets tied up with visions for future markets, economic goals. It's not just about objective harm.
So risk isn't just about things going wrong, it's about whose interests are prioritized.
Precisely. The EU AI Act, for instance, actually uses a pretty vague definition of risk. It kind of obscures these political and economic dimensions. And surprisingly, there isn't much solid research on how we even conceptualize risk when we talk about regulating new tech like AI. The field hasn't really agreed on how to identify AI risks, let alone deal with them effectively.
So it becomes a negotiation.
Right. A negotiation often between interests that have very different levels of power. And a really critical piece of this flawed measurement happens in the standardization process.
Standardization, you mean like setting technical benchmarks?
Exactly. Technical standards are supposed to define and measure risk, but they are absolutely not neutral. They inherently bake in value judgments.
Like what?
Well, think about deciding what's an acceptable error rate for an AI system. Say, one used in medical diagnosis or hiring, what error rate is acceptable? Who decides?
Yeah. That's not just a technical question.
Not at all. But getting consensus on these complex, value-loaded issues in a committee full of different stakeholders, it's incredibly difficult. And what happens is this process essentially bypasses the kind of normative choices that lawmakers, elected officials should be making. It leads to what the paper calls insufficient democratic control.
So key decisions about what's acceptable, what trade-offs we make, end up being decided by technical bodies or even the AI companies themselves.
That's the danger. And for you, listening, it means that even these seemingly neutral technical standards for AI might be carrying hidden biases or economic agendas that haven't really been debated out in the open democratically.
That's a really powerful point. Can you give a concrete example? Like, how might a decision on acceptable error rates bypass lawmakers, and what could that mean for someone?
Sure, absolutely. Let's stick with the hiring example. An AI is used to screen candidates. A technical standard sets a low error rate for picking qualified people. Now, if that rate is set by a committee, maybe heavily influenced by industry wanting efficiency, without broader public or democratic input, it might unintentionally lock in existing biases.
How so?
Well, maybe the AI performs just slightly worse for women or people from certain ethnic backgrounds, maybe because the data it learned from was biased. So even a statistically low overall error rate could mean that specific groups are disproportionately rejected. And the critical point is, lawmakers might never explicitly debate whether that specific kind of error or that level of disparity is something we as a society find acceptable.
Wow. So the bias gets hidden inside the technical spec.
Exactly. It's subtly baked in, not openly legislated. Which leads nicely into the second limitation. Trustworthy AI being used as a regulatory visibility tactic. You hear trustworthy AI all the time in policy discussions.
Yeah, it sounds good. We want AI we can trust.
Of course. But the critique is that it's maybe overly ambitious as a regulatory goal because trust itself is so complex. What does it even mean for AI? And beneath the surface, AI policy is constantly doing this balancing act, right? Trying to foster economic growth and address societal worries. But often, the potential conflict between those two goals isn't openly discussed.
So trustworthy AI becomes a marketing term.
It can function that way. The research suggests it can be a visibility tactic. Businesses and regulators use the term to encourage people to adopt the technology and also to gain a competitive advantage. The European Commission was actually explicit about this. They said their ethics agenda could become a competitive edge for European businesses globally.
So it's about branding as much as safety.
Potentially. And this can lead to what the paper calls performative politics. You define risk in a way that aligns with your economic goals. It might offer a kind of veneer of legal protection, but without the really meaningful safeguards underneath.
Okay, so flawed risk measurement and potentially performative trustworthiness. What's limitation number 3?
Limitation 3 is the limited focus, mainly on high-risk AI systems. The EU AI Act, for example, puts most of its weight on defining and regulating high-risk systems, plus general-purpose AI, GPAI, and a few others with transparency rules.
That seems logical too. Focus on the dangerous stuff first.
It does, but the critique here is that this narrow focus completely overlooks the cumulative effect of all the supposedly low or medium-risk systems out there.
Ah, the death by 1,000 cuts idea.
Sort of, yeah. These individually small harms, maybe subtle biases or minor erosions of privacy, can add up over time across many systems. They can aggregate and lead to really significant harm at a group or even societal level. But because no single system crosses the high-risk threshold, this aggregated harm gets missed by the regulation.
Is there a better model?
Well, the article draws a comparison to toy safety rules. The EU directive for toys puts basic obligations on all toys sold, with extra rules for the ones considered high risk. The AI Act could have taken a similar, broader quality management approach for all AI, instead of just the intense focus on safety assessments for a select few high-risk ones. So that narrow scope is seen as a real limitation.
Okay, that makes sense. And the fourth limitation.
The fourth one is the AI geopolitical power imbalance. This is huge. AI development and, importantly, operation is dominated by a handful of massive companies, a sort of oligopoly, and they're primarily based in the US and China.
Right, big tech.
Exactly. This creates a massive dependency for everyone else. All the expertise, the computing power, the data, it's concentrated. And AI regulation, surprisingly often, just doesn't grapple with the undeniable significance of the origin of AI. Where it comes from matters. These huge companies also have immense control over the global attention economy.
How does that imbalance affect regulation like the EU Act?
Well, here's the rub. The EU is trying to be a regulatory leader setting the rules, but it lags significantly behind the US and China in actual AI innovation and deployment. This makes the EU, according to the research, susceptible to lobbying efforts from big tech companies. And there are reports that this lobbying pressure has already watered down some of the original intentions of the AI Act.
So the rule setter is vulnerable to the players it's trying to rule.
That's the dynamic. And if you combine this power imbalance with the potential Brussels effect, you could end up spreading flawed regulations rules weakened by lobbying across the globe unintentionally.
Wow. Okay. That paints a pretty concerning picture. Flawed risk, performative trust, too narrow a focus, and this massive power imbalance.
Yeah.
If our main way of regulating AI is that shaky, where do we go? It sounds like we need a whole new way to even think about AI.
Exactly. And that's where the article introduces a really different lens. Anthony Giddens' structuration theory.
Structuration theory. Okay, break that down for us.
Okay. Imagine a game. The rules of the game influence how you play, right?
Yeah.
But how you and everyone else plays can also subtly change the understanding of the rules, maybe even lead to rule changes over time.
Okay, yeah, like house rules and Monopoly.
Kind of. Giddens' theory is about that dynamic in society. He talked about how humans actively shape the world he lives in at the same time as it shapes him. It focuses on the duality of structure. That's the rules and resources in society and agency. That's human action. These two things are constantly interacting, influencing each other, shaping and reshaping society in this ongoing loop.
Okay, I think I follow the basic idea. Structure shapes action, action shapes structure. How does AI fit in?
This is the really radical step the article takes. It proposes we understand AI not just as a tool within that structure, but as an entirely new agent that actively participates in that duality, in that loop of shaping society.
Whoa. AI as an agent. Does that mean it needs to be conscious? Like Skynet?
No, not necessarily conscious in a human way. That's key. Giddens' theory has this concept of reflexivity or monitored flow. It's about an agent monitoring its own actions in relation to its goals or environment. Think about AI's programming. It often has objectives, things it's trying to achieve, desirable outcomes. It monitors its progress towards those. That's a form of internal monitoring, a kind of reflexivity, even without consciousness.
So its goals and learning act like a form of agency.
Exactly. And we see evidence of this emerging agency already. AI can be unpredictable. It inherits and sometimes amplifies biases. Crucially, it can learn and adapt its own rules for operating. We're seeing machines capable of proactivity, reasoning, and planning. Their decision-making autonomy is growing, reducing direct human control over their outputs.
So they're moving beyond just following instructions.
Yes. They're transitioning into entities that don't just interact with us, but can actually influence our thinking and our will to make real-world decisions.
That's a big conceptual leap. So AI isn't just a tool anymore, it's influencing the influencer.
That's a good way to put it. Giddens had this quote: "There are no patterns of universal causation in the social sciences, because all causal connections are mediated by agents' knowledgeability and agents' reasons."
Meaning people's understanding affects outcomes.
Right. And the paper applies this by saying, okay, AI is now also an agent mediating causal connections. It has its own form of knowledge, its data and algorithms and its own reasons, its programmed objectives and learned patterns. It's mediating its own effects on the world, shaping the rules and resources of our social systems, creating this incredibly complex circular impact.
Okay, wow. So if AI is an active agent shaping society alongside us, how on earth do you regulate that? What does the structuration approach actually look like in practice for governance?
Well, it fundamentally reorients the goal. Instead of just focusing on the use of AI or its predefined risk level, regulation should focus on the unique and emergent capabilities of AI related to their functioning.
Their functioning? So how they work internally, how they learn and adapt.
Exactly. Digging deeper into the process, not just the application or the potential outcome based on a static risk assessment.
Okay, so how would you do that? What are the steps?
Operationally, the article suggests first, you have to clearly define and differentiate all the actors involved in this messy interplay, not just the human developer, the human user, but the AI system itself, maybe different components of it, the data sources. Map out the whole complex web of relationships. You need a detailed actor taxonomy.
Get a clear picture of who or what is doing what.
Precisely. Second, and this is crucial, those big normative decisions, the value judgments about what's right, fair, acceptable, they must be handled by legitimate democratic processes. Because AI's impact is so widespread, affecting fundamental rights for almost everyone, you need broad public discussion, solid systemic research, and real participation from civil society to negotiate those choices.
Keep those value judgments out of the technical committees alone.
Yes, don't let acceptable risk be an undefined term or left solely to the AI providers. It needs democratic legitimacy.
Makes sense. What's the third step?
Third, you need to constantly consider the reflexive contextual conditions. That means actively trying to understand how AI is influencing the way people and institutions act, how it's changing agency, and how the structures of society might be changing as a result. This approach, the paper argues, provides deep insight into the manner of that change. It acknowledges you can't just tweak one part, like adding a safety checklist for high-risk AI. You have to grasp the systemic circular feedback loops.
So it's about understanding the whole evolving system, not just classifying parts of it.
Exactly. And there's a warning attached here, too. If we rely too much on purely rationalized standards, technical metrics, things that are easy to quantify statistically,
We might miss something important.
we might inadvertently co-produce a specific understanding of dignity, privacy, justice, and other core values that aligns with what's measurable rather than what society actually values through democratic discussion. It could distort our very understanding of those fundamental rights to fit the metrics.
Which brings us back to needing those democratic processes involved.
Absolutely paramount.
Okay, this has been a really fascinating journey. We started with AI being everywhere, this global rush to regulate it, mostly using this risk-based approach. But then we really dug into the problems with that, the flawed idea of risk, the trustworthy label being potentially just for show, the narrow focus on high risk, and these huge geopolitical power dynamics shaping everything.
Yeah, a lot of challenges with the current dominant model.
And then we shifted perspective completely, using structuration theory to see AI not just as a sophisticated tool, but potentially as this new kind of agent, actively participating in shaping society, just as society shapes it.
Right. It forces us to acknowledge AI is beyond a discrete tool or single technology. Its regulation needs a framework that can actually grasp its true extent and complexities. Structuration theory offers a lens to see that circular impact on our rules, our resources, and our own actions.
It really shows that AI isn't just changing what we do, is it? It might be changing who we are, how we relate to each other, how we govern ourselves.
That's the profound implication.
So a final thought for everyone listening. If AI really can actively participate in this recursive shaping of society, maybe even influence its own regulation through these complex loops, what does that mean for your role? How do we all understand and maybe influence the future rules of this increasingly AI intertwined world we're building?
That's the question we all need to grapple with.